Episode 5 of Season 2 of The Mandalorian is called The Jedi, and this was probably the most hyped I've been about an episode of The Mandalorian in the entire show. Because it was one thing to have Bo-Katan mention Ahsoka 2 episodes ago, but it was a whole different thing to actually see Ahsoka in this episode. And of course, the opening sequence starts right off with her kicking all the ass. It's an awesome sequence. At least that's how it was back in the day. Still is though, but I remember the first time that I watched this and I was just like, I was so happy. I was yelling. I was like, oh my God, what am I even seeing? Because this is something that, as a fan of the animated shows, I've been watching the animated shows for like decades at this point, I was not sure we would ever see in Star Wars, but we did. So remembering that feeling of seeing this episode the first time is always a special feeling that I will always remember. But of course, the question now is, how does this episode hold up 5 years later, now with my review, now looking back at it, at also what we have gotten ever since this episode came out? Because ever since this episode came out, several things have come out in terms of other TV shows that give backstory to what happened specifically in this episode. So as I said, the opening sequence is on Corvus, where we see Ahsoka take on a bunch of Morgan Elsbeth's guards. And Ahsoka's, of course, kicking all the ass, which is awesome. I have to give massive props to Rosario Dawson. I've done this, by the way, in my reviews for the Ahsoka series, but I'm still going to do this here because this was the first time she was in, the makeup and all the props to make her look that way. And she still is very agile, able to kick all the ass. And it's really awesome to see her as the character in this opening sequence, in this episode in general. But where this episode and already the opening sequence changes a little bit for me is having the backstory of Morgan Elsbeth, which we saw in Tales of the Empire. If you haven't seen it, it's only 3 short episodes of like 10 minutes each, so it's like half an hour, and I do think it's a decent backstory for her. The unfortunate thing is that I think the first 2 episodes are really good, and then the third one, which leads right into this episode, is kind of the weakest one because it just paints Morgan as a very evil bitch for the sake of it, because she's just hateful for her past. Where, in that regard, Morgan doesn't really get any sympathy points from that. So, other than the first 2 episodes, which does, explain a little bit about her, it's not the best arc, I will give you that. I didn't think it was that bad, though. But in addition to that, we also now have a little bit more backstory as to what happened to Ahsoka in the past couple of years, because when this episode first came out, I had no idea what had happened to her in the past 10 years before this episode. And now, thanks to the Ahsoka show, there's a little bit more of an explanation. So it makes a little bit more sense why Ahsoka is here doing what she's doing and, taking on Morgan Elsbeth, and also not really caring that she's killing people because she's not exactly a Jedi anymore. The episode might be called The Jedi. I think that's more so for the dum-dums who haven't watched a single bit of other Star Wars content, because there's one very famous line that I really love from Ahsoka in Twilight of the Apprentice.
I am no Jedi.
So in that regard, yeah, she's not exactly a Jedi. She doesn't follow the Jedi Order's rules anymore. Therefore, she can kill if she wants, and it's pretty awesome. So then finally, Din and Grogu arrive on the planet, and well, they see that it's a big shithole, that Morgan Elsbeth's rule is not good for the planet, but he does need to accept the mission because otherwise he can't, be on the planet and be in Morgan's good graces. So he's like, okay, I'll take care of your Jedi problem. He's not, of course. He just needs to do that to make sure that he can get close to the Jedi without Morgan getting in the way. So eventually, Din gets to Ahsoka. I will say, though, a couple of Easter eggs that I really liked in this. You have Michael Biehn, who I know as Kyle Reese from the Terminator movies. Nice to see him back in any kind of sci-fi fantasy type capacity. And in addition to that, I also really like the guard droids for Morgan. There are HK units, which I, as a KOTOR fan, know from the KOTOR games. So it was cool to see them in a live action show. I know that by this point we've seen them in Ahsoka, but I think this was the first time we saw them in live action Star Wars. But Din and Grogu find Ahsoka, and well, I've been saying Grogu all this time, but this was actually the first time that we heard the name of Grogu. I remember that people were not entirely sure how they felt about the name the first time we heard it. I thought it was a perfectly fine name, and what I really like about the name in this specific episode is every time that Din says Grogu, Grogu turns, and it's just the cutest thing ever. I love it. And in general, Grogu is extremely cute in this episode because apparently using the Force tires him out a lot. But one thing that he wants to use the Force for is that little ball of the stick from the Razor Crest. So the fact that Din uses that to make sure that Grogu uses his powers, it is really cute. And yeah, in that regard, I also think it's a very good episode for Din and Grogu's bond, which we really see, which is, of course, eventually the reason that Ahsoka says no to them. But that's beside the point. I do think this is a very good episode for the bonding of Din and Grogu. But now, having seen the Ahsoka show, we also know why Ahsoka is more apprehensive towards trying to train someone, because she tried to do that with Sabine, apparently. Which, at the time that this episode came out, I didn't know. I had no idea. Like, she mentioned something about how she's seen that Jedi went the wrong way, which initially probably was just hinting at Anakin. But now, having seen what happened with her and Sabine, it's like, oh, that really happened. And that gives it a bit more layers, which actually, to me, enhances the episode, enhances Ahsoka's character. Because initially, I was like, Ahsoka is a bit of a stuck-up bitch in this episode, but it's a bit better now. But of course, Din still needs a Jedi to train Grogu, so Ahsoka's like, okay, well, let's both take on Morgan and we'll see what we can come up with. So they go into the village, and the action sequence to take on Morgan is pretty awesome. Like, Din and Ahsoka kicking ass together. Yeah, it's a very good one. I really enjoy it. Very good choreography, some very good tension, some good moments in terms of like a standoff, and also like the fight between Ahsoka and Morgan reminds me a lot of like a samurai fight. And also props to Diana Lee and Asanto for, you know, having such good choreography. The choreography between them for that fight is really good, I think. So yeah, not a lot of complaints. I really enjoy this episode. But my favorite moment in this episode has to be the moment that Ahsoka says Grand Admiral Thrawn, because I remember first seeing that and hearing that and just screaming like, oh my god, yes. Because also, if we go back to like only 2016, there was a celebration where we got a teaser trailer for Star Wars Rebels Season 3. And they made a huge moment about, of course, the moment that Thrawn showed up in that. And I remember everyone went absolutely nuts for the reveal of Thrawn. And this right here, of course, confirmed we are going to get a live action Thrawn at some point, which now we have seen, and having seen him is like, yes, yeah, just all the yes. This episode made me so happy at the time because I knew it would spark things in the future. And what was also crazy is that I've now been to a Star Wars celebration. I went to the one in 2023 where we saw the Ahsoka trailer. It was revealed to us on the floor there, and we all went nuts seeing that trailer. We all went nuts seeing Thrawn, even though it was just the back of his head. We all went nuts. It was amazing. So that's just one of the joys that this episode started, you know, and that's why I will always remember the moment that Ahsoka just mentions Grand Admiral Thrawn in this episode. So in the end, Ahsoka and Din win. Din gets his spear, and that spear, of course, is turned into the little chainmail that Grogu gets later on. So that's actually kind of cute. That is what happens with the spear that he gets in this episode. But then at the end, Ahsoka says something to Din. She's like, go to Tython and use the Seeing Stone. And that's the way to connect to the Jedi. And this is where I just have a little bit of an issue with Ahsoka as a character. Ahsoka, you're saying, oh yeah, no, the Seeing Stone will get you to a Jedi. A Jedi. How many Jedi are left in the galaxy at this point? Let's do a head count, because Kanan is dead. Ezra is gone. You have no idea if he's even alive at this point, but we don't know. Jason Syndulla is alive, but he's a kid. And you don't want to train anyone, so that's not going to go anywhere. You also didn't train Sabine, so that also didn't work. and in terms of that's the Rebels cast. Other than that, there's not a lot confirmed. Cal Kestis is unconfirmed at this point in the galaxy as well. Obi-Wan is dead. Yoda is dead. So, as far as I know, and as far as Ahsoka should know, there's literally one Jedi, Luke Skywalker. And according to the book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka, you know where Luke Skywalker lives. So why the fuck don't you just send Din to the planet of Luke and you're just like, go see Luke. There he is. Why would that be so difficult? He's literally the only Jedi you know, and the only one that you know would be capable of training Grogu. Then again, the only thing that I can really think of, and this is actually kind of a legit reason in the history of Star Wars, the Jedi are cryptic as fuck, and they don't just give you a straight answer, so that's why Ahsoka's like, well, you can go there and maybe you'll find someone. Because, we also got to have a finale with everything that's happening. So I can get that from like a writing perspective. I just think it's not the best writing because it just is another detour to delay the remainder of the season. And also to introduce Boba Fett, because otherwise we wouldn't have Boba Fett in the show. At least as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, other than that, I really enjoyed this episode. It's a great episode. So many things to look back on what it did. Also, now that we have more backstory because of certain things that came after, it's like looking back at it, like actually the backstory really helps this episode, makes you understand certain characters better. So yeah, no, it definitely holds up 5 years later. I love this episode. It's a really good one. But that is about all I can say about episode 5 of season 2, The Jedi. What are your thoughts on this episode? Do you also like it? And how do you look back on it now? Or do you have some issues with it? Please let me know in the comments below. I just realized I forgot to wish people a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, that kind of stuff. Tomorrow, by the way, Sunday, today is Saturday when this video drops, so on Sunday I'm going to do my last live stream of the year where I will finish building the USS Enterprise, so join me for that one. I think it should be a good one, and then I'm looking forward to the new year. If you are interested to see more Star Wars content, please subscribe to my channel, and that is about all I can say. So until my next video, may the Force be with you.